Water. It is quick enough to slip through your fingers and strong enough to hold up a ship, hot enough to keep your stomach full, yet cool enough to refresh you on a hot summer day. It can be tough enough to help you start fresh. It makes you think about how you look at life, whether the glass is half empty or half full. Most of all, it is nurturing enough to sustain your life and mine.
The miracle of water, often taken for granted and often overlooked. Where does water come from?
The path of water is cyclical. Water falls from the sky and eventually finds its way to our rivers and streams. Then, as sure as the sun rises, water returns to the sky and falls back down again. Caring for our rivers and watersheds assures us of a constant supply of water. This cycle assures us of rain that collects in our watersheds, flows to our rivers, and fills up our dams. This is the Angat Reservoir. It is where Metro Manila gets 97% of its water. The Angat Reservoir is a testament to the power and majesty of nature. It mesmerizes. It captivates. It leaves you breathless. The Angat Dam in Norsagaray, Bulacan is a multi-purpose dam built for domestic water consumption, irrigation, and power generation. From here, raw water is diverted by Ipo Dam to an interconnection of tunnels and aqueducts underground that all lead to La Mesa Dam. This is La Mesa Dam, a reservoir that can hold up to 50.5 million cubic meters of water.
La Mesa Dam acts as a primary settling basin.
Heavier particles already settle at the bottom of the reservoir. From La Mesa Dam, water flows through another set of aqueducts into water treatment plants. What are water treatment plants? Let's find out. East La Mesa is one example of a water treatment plant. It is the largest water system built by Manila Water and has the capacity to produce 150 million liters of potable water per day. Water treatment happens in this facility. The process of water treatment makes water safe for you to use and drink. What happens to the raw water from the dams? The first step in the water treatment process is called coagulation. You can see an exposed pipe with liquid that is being added to the raw water. What is being added is aluminum sulfate, better known as alum or tawas. Although chlorination deactivates some microorganisms and bacteria, there are still suspended and scattered particles called colloids that make the water hazy or turbid. Like similarly charged magnets, these tiny colloids naturally repel and bounce off each other. The alum or tawas neutralizes these colloids so they stick together. This is called coagulation.
To help with coagulation, giant mixers below the water allow the alum to be thoroughly mixed.
The second step looks almost identical to the first step, except instead of alum, a substance called polymer is added. Down below, floating pinhead flocks begin to stick together as they encounter polymer. Imagine polymer as Velcro. Particles that encounter polymer stick to it. The more particles it attracts, the bigger the mass becomes. As the particles increase in size, they become denser and sink. The particles that merge together are called flocks, and the process is called flocculation. Let's move on to the next step, which is called sedimentation. Water then flows below sedimentation basins and upwards through tube settlers. As water travels upward, encountering resistance from the diagonally mounted tube settlers, remaining flocks are trapped and once again sink. Clear water rises to the top, and the end result is called clarified water. Let's move on to step 4, which is filtration. There's a whole building here at East La Mesa just for filtration. Clarified water then flows through filter beds. Believe it or not, there are still tiny suspended leftover particles and harmful bacteria. At the East La Mesa water treatment plant, filter beds are composed of a single layer of silica sand, which is effective at filtering out the remaining tiny particles in the water. The final step is called chlorination. Here, chlorine is added before water is pumped out for distribution to ensure adequate disinfection. These machines regulate chlorine. Take a close look at the yellow-green substance. That's chlorine in gas form. This is a precautionary step, and residual chlorine guarantees the potability of water that reaches you. How does water get to your tap? Large primary lines from treatment plants run above ground, underground, and through creeks to bring water to reservoirs or storage tanks, just with the aid of gravity. However, in higher areas, water needs to be pumped to reservoirs and storage tanks. Reservoirs or storage tanks is where water is stored before reaching you. This holding tank in En Domingo can hold water for 44 Olympic-sized swimming pools. From these storage tanks, treated water then goes through a network of pipes beneath the city. Water exits the network through a service pipe that leads to a water meter before entering homes, schools, and businesses. How do we make sure that the water that gets to you is safe to drink and use? Our laboratory's world-class accreditations, recognitions, and standards are our guarantee that we work hard to make certain that you get the safest and cleanest water possible. The water quality of Manila water has consistently surpassed the Philippine national standards for drinking water, set by the Department of Health and based on the World Health Organization water quality guidelines. Laboratory tests involve collecting water samples from different sources, treatment plants, and communities daily. Manila Water collects from more than 800 sampling points. Both DOH and MWSS also conduct their own sampling to ensure water quality. Here, we see water samples taken from a school and brought to the Manila Water Laboratory for testing to ensure consistent quality. But we're not only concerned about the water you drink, we're also concerned about the water you've used. So what about used water, like the water you flush down your toilet? Or the water you throw down your drain? What happens to it? Where does used water go? This used water is called sewage. Since Manila Water won the East Zone concession in 1997, it has developed two types of used water treatment plants: septage and sewage treatment plants.
In homes with septic tanks, the sludge or mud-like biomass that accumulates over time needs to be collected by a desludging truck, then brought to the septage treatment plant.
Sewage treatment plants treat used water or sewage. This can be collected in either of two ways. For homes connected to sewer lines, used water goes straight to sewage treatment plants. In areas where sewer lines are not yet available, used water goes to drainage lines. Manila Water then intercepts the drainage lines by interceptor pipes and boxes. Instead of flowing straight to rivers, used water is diverted to sewage treatment plants. This is an example of a sewage treatment plant. This is in East Avenue in Quezon City. Used water or sewage that is treated here comes from homes connected to sewer lines. You will notice that the water here is murky. This is because these tanks contain used water and not raw water.
Used water first passes through a screening system. The screening system contains several chambers which removes objects such as plastic, hair rags, sand, and grease.
After screening, used water is then distributed to primary sedimentation tanks. Notice how these tanks are shaped, wide at the opening and gradually tapering off at the bottom. Here, remaining large solid particles like sand, silt, soil, and gravel settle at the bottom of the tank. Gravity pulls the particles downward. After used water is clarified, it then enters aeration tanks. Aeration is the heart of the used water treatment process. Aeration tanks have diffusers where air is released from blowers.
The air is essential to keeping the microorganisms alive that consume most of the pollutants in the water. These microorganisms thrive in the mud-like biomass called activated sludge. Before we go to the next process, what is all the fuss about activated sludge? Activated sludge is the most important and interesting stage of the treatment process. What makes it interesting is that the microorganisms present in the activated sludge need oxygen to survive, just like human beings. These microorganisms use oxygen to consume the pollutants in used water.
After aeration, water goes through secondary sedimentation. Look at what happens here, as demonstrated with a clear cone. Thickened sludge separates from the treated water, and gravity pulls it down. After secondary sedimentation, some of the sludge is returned to the aeration tanks to maintain the required amount of sludge to consume the pollutants in the next batch of incoming used water.
The sludge becomes activated sludge, kept alive by oxygen. Now that you've come to understand more about sludge, let's proceed to the final step in the used water treatment process. Disinfection. Chlorine is added before being released back to our rivers.
Seems simple enough, right? But what if your home has a septic tank? Homes not connected to sewer lines usually have septic tanks. These tanks have to be cleaned through the process of desludging. This is the start of the septage treatment process.
Desludging is the process of removing sludge called septage that has settled at the bottom of septic tanks.
Desludging is another service Manila Water provides. It needs to be done every 5 to 7 years. If you disregard this important responsibility, used water may seep into the soil or overflow and affect your family's health and the health of the environment.
After desludging, septage is brought to either two septage treatment plants of Manila Water in FTI Taguig and San Mateo, Rizal.
Septage goes through a process of septage acceptance, wherein metal screens separate large solid particles from the liquid. Septage is then injected with polymer through a process called dewatering. Remember polymer from the water treatment process?
Similarly, here it also acts as a binding agent that separates the remaining solid particles from the liquid.
The solid particles combine or compact into a dark brown soil-like material. These are shipped off and further treated before it is used as a soil conditioner. Meantime, the squeezed out used water from the sludge is treated in the exact same process that happens in sewage treatment plants. Do you recall aeration, sedimentation, and disinfection? Treated used water is now ready to be returned to our rivers, which flows through larger bodies of water like Manila Bay and Laguna de Bay. This is considered Class C water, now capable of sustaining marine life. The environment we operate in is important to us.
Our Holandés used water treatment plant in Marikina is successfully integrated with its surrounding community and has a flood impact mitigation design. It is capable of treating 10 million liters of water per day.
Our used water treatment plant in Marikina and Taguig
Are world-class facilities. Our Taguig facility is capable of treating 75 million liters of water per day.
And as water is treated below, right above is a park open to the public. Clean, green open spaces like these help create urban renewal. But it doesn't end here, because water is a cycle. The same water that falls from the sky is the water that is collected in dams and treated in water treatment facilities, making it safe to use and drink. After being used, the same water goes to used water treatment facilities to be treated and made safe for aquatic life before being returned to our rivers. The same water in our rivers and oceans evaporates and becomes rain to once again fall from the sky into our dams, and the cycle repeats itself. This is the miracle of nature. Treating raw water and used water is a miracle of science. Think about the miracle of water every time you have a glass to drink.